Welcome everyone today. My name is Kimberly Bradley. I'm the Conversations Curator at Art Basel Miami Beach. And we're happy to have such a good crowd at this hour to hear more about how AI and cloud technologies are shifting, transforming, easing the world of art collecting. On stage with us are Steve Clayton, all the way to the left, Vice President of Communication Strategy and also sometimes Chief Storyteller at Microsoft in Seattle. In the center is Pablo Rodríguez-Fraile, investor and philanthropist. And moderating today is Laurie Rojas from Miami, a writer, cultural strategist, and consultant. Let's give everyone on stage a warm round of applause. And enjoy the conversation.
Hello, welcome everybody. Okay, now I'm getting a sense. As you've heard, my name is Laurie Rojas. I'm based here in Miami. I'm a longtime writer, and I also do cultural strategy and consulting around communications. It's a privilege for me to join you all today. We are going to really ask the question how AI and cloud technologies are transforming art collecting. This panel is also made in collaboration with Microsoft as the launch of a new AI-driven Art Basel app. So today we'll delve into the inspiration behind the Art Basel app and explore how it can enhance questions of art discovery and accessibility. We'll also discuss the broader impact of digital tools on the art world and look ahead to the future of art collecting. So we're fortunate to have two incredible panelists with us today. First, Steve Clayton. As was mentioned, he's the Vice President of Communication Strategy and Storytelling with 25 years of experience in technology and storytelling behind it. He's not only a leader in crafting Microsoft's communication strategy, but also an emerging new art collector with a passion for making art and the art world more accessible. So at the same time, we have Pablo Rodríguez-Fraile. He's a pioneering philanthropist when it comes to digital art and AI-driven art technologies. He's been instrumental in really shaping the digital art landscape. He has a groundbreaking RFC art collection based here in Miami, which holds both traditional artworks and digital art. More recently, he led the co-donation of Refik Anadol's unsupervised machine hallucinations to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So in the next 45 minutes, we'll examine what these technologies and technological advancements mean for collectors, for artists, for galleries, and how to navigate this rapidly evolving landscape. So let's dive right in. Steve, can you just, as a launching pad, basically tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind the Art Basel app and collaboration with Copilot?
Yeah, well, first, it's great to be here. It's incredibly bright, by the way, if you're sat up here. So, and it's going to get warm. But yeah, it's really great to be here with both of you. And, you know, the inspiration behind the app, and if you haven't had a chance to use it, you can download it for free. There's QR codes around the space here, so I'd encourage you to take a look at it. And the inspiration, I think, ultimately is how do we make art and the art world and everything that goes around it more accessible? And when I first heard about the app, I was incredibly pleased because I'll tell you a quick story because I'm into storytelling. Last summer, I was in Basel, seeing some friends, not for the fair, not to look at art, but I've got some friends and ex-neighbors from Seattle who live in Basel, and they're sort of very emerging collectors. They've got interested in art, and they said to me, gosh, we went to the fair this summer, and they said, we just didn't know where to start. It was overwhelming for them. And it can be, right? Anybody coming into this building, this space for the first time, you walk down onto the floor, and it is overwhelming. It's like, where do I start? And that's what the intention of the app is to do, is to break down some of those barriers to allow you to say, well, I'm interested in this type of art, you know, from a certain country or from a certain culture or a certain material type of art. But I'm also interested in where can I get coffee, and are there any great restaurants around here? So that ultimately is what the app is all about. And then there's a set of, you know, we can talk about it a bit more, some unique features around using AI and computer vision that allow you to do things like take a photograph of a piece of art and then very quickly get more details on that and store it and learn and, you know, keep it in your collections. But ultimately, it's this shared vision between Microsoft applying technology to try and break down the barriers, you know, just generally, and Art Basel, who are trying to do the same for the world of art. So that's really the shared inspiration.
That's wonderful. And Pablo, since you're a collector deeply engaged in both digital and AI practices, How has this kind of technology, apps, social media, etc., shaped your journey as a collector?
I also want to start by saying that I'm deeply honored to be with both of you here today, and I'm very thankful as well to our Basel to have this conversation. I think they're very, very important to be pioneering and to be at the forefront of what's happening here. But again, he was extraordinarily eloquent, as usual, on saying how this can really help with the discoverability for breaking down some of those barriers that are, again, typically associated with digital art. In our case, it's slightly difficult, but again, there can be some analytics and some much broader discoverability that I think some of these tools are really emerging and are becoming even more and more powerful over time. And to me, it's very important to be very inclusive for a bigger and a bigger audience to participate in what's happening here in the world of art as a whole. And again, all of these tools really help us to enhance that inclusiveness across the board. It's much easier today to get engaged if you're using some of these tools to broaden the information that is available to you today. Yeah.
And how have these technologies shaped your journey as a collector?
Well, I mean, it's a very exciting tool. It's something that AI is relatively new and something that wasn't here before. And for us, at least as collector, we're deeply engaged with this in a way that perhaps it's not as relatable to everybody here. But we find this a very exciting tool that allows for an exploration of different themes, of different analytics, of different processes that were just simply not available for artists and creators even just a handful of years ago. So for us, we just find when a new technology emerges, when a new method, when a new medium emerges, I think it's very exciting to see the possibilities that we cannot even imagine where they're going to lead us. So it's just a very dynamic and new and novel way to engage with art that was just simply not available before.
Thank you. Steve, since Microsoft's Copilot is really designed around like user engagement and personalization, how do you see this technology, but also similar technologies around reshaping this kind of collectors' discovery, learning about educating themselves, and to be able to connect in places like art fairs?
I think, probably I'll do a quick survey, show of hands. How many people have used or played with ChatGPT?
Oh, yes.
Good.
Sorry.
Okay, so most people in the room. So ChatGPT came around 2 years ago, and it's really changed the way, and will continue to change the way that we interface with technology. And we spent the last 20 years training ourselves as a species to use search engines, to put something into a search engine, into a prompt box, and to get a set of 10 blue links back. And you click on the first link and you go off, and maybe it answered your question, maybe it didn't. But this technology is very different. It's a conversation, as you've all seen with ChatGPT, if you really start to get into this generative AI technology. So then you take that into the art world, and as an emerging collector, let's put it, or a very novice collector as I am, it can be very intimidating to come to a place like this or to walk into a gallery and to ask questions because you sort of don't know where to start. And so when you marry this beauty of this generative AI technology where you can ask a question and then you can say, well, that's not quite what I was looking for. Can you tell me it differently in this way? Or could you translate it into a different language? Or could you give me an answer that's a visual answer? Or I'm going to speak into it and get an image back. This idea of the technology is becoming what's called multimodal. So you can use speech or text or voice to input and get images or text or audio output. And all of that in the same way that it's making discovery on, I'll just call it the internet, much easier as a conversation. Then you apply that to the world of art, and I think that is fascinating for people who are probably very rightly intimidated by, well, where do I start? What are the questions I should ask about this piece? Or how do I explain the type of art that I'm looking for? And so that, I think, both for me, but hopefully for people in the room, or people who use the app, it does just start to break down these barriers and lower the barrier to entry to the world of art.
Yeah, Pablo, how do you see these technologies around reshaping how collectors basically engage with art and discover it?
Again, I think that through not only through AI, but through this digital revolution that we're experiencing, I think it's again very inclusive for a lot of creators. We're seeing the emergence of creators and the new generation really starting to express themselves through these digital toolings. And sometimes it can be a little bit too fragmented and too spread out. These tools really help you to he said it better than more eloquently than I think I can, but to really have that discoverability of the AI start to understand you and understand your taste and understand what drives you, and they can point you into different directions that perhaps without these tools you would never find. So I do agree with him that sometimes if you're not an art connoisseur, many of the galleries, many of the fairs, many of the auction houses can feel a little bit overwhelming, particularly at first. And I think that this will allow collectors to really expand their horizon and to find new artists that otherwise would just simply be impossible. And again, I think that we're going to continue to see a major expansion of new creatives coming into the space, and without these tools, it would just be impossible.
Yeah, you're very familiar with what I would say artists practically creating some of their own code, AI code, generating art through generative AI. So how do you see artists potentially themselves being able to reach out, connect to collectors?
Well, I think this is also not only through AI, but I think we're living now in a place where we're all interconnected through the web, in many cases as well through social media. One of the things that I like is that a lot of the new generation of artists are a lot more available than what were traditionally associated to artists in the past, where you can acquire work from them and send them a DM or reach out in other ways and connect to them. And I think that all of this together allows for a more engaging and dynamic relationship with the artist that I think creates a very powerful relationship that I think makes you want to participate even further. And again, utilizing particularly discoverability features of AI, I think this is all going to continue to be enhanced.
How do you consider the complexity of the technology that artists are using in generating and creating art a barrier itself for potential collectors who are interested in different types of digital art?
Can you repeat the
So is the complexity of the technology also a barrier for collectors to, say, understand someone like Refik Anadol's work?
Yeah, so I think initially it might be a small technical barrier, but I think actually everything is just being a lot more normalized. And it's like with the inclusion of any new technology at the beginning, it might take a little bit of time to fully download into the general consciousness of society. But I think very, very quickly, particularly for the younger generations, it is something that they immediately feel very comfortable. I actually think that overall, once you are curious and you make those first steps to try to understand the technology, I think it's actually something much easier than other things that we have seen in the past. And I expect this to continue and to be very helpful for new collectors.
Laurie, if I could just add to that, something that struck me earlier, I got to walk down onto the show floor, and the first piece I saw, and you'll see it if you go down the escalators, is this, the best way I can describe it is a set of yellow vinyl that has been put together to create just a sort of bit of a mind-bending image. And I have a 12-year-old daughter who, she's really into art. She sits and she sketches every night, and she draws, and she loves sketching. And I would imagine her going down the escalator in this building, and she'd see that, and she would say, what is that? Like, how did it get made? Like, how can I do that? What are the skills I need? And that's where I think this technology and the ability to, again, I'll keep coming back to lowering the barriers of entry for everybody, whether it's, collectors or emerging young artists. And the other way I think it lowers the barrier is globally. Now somebody who's an emerging artist in the continent of Africa who previously couldn't have got their works in front of, a forum like this, the technology is breaking down those barriers as well. So I'm just excited to see the whole landscape of this culture and art just becoming more accessible to more people.
Do you have anything to add with regards?
I think he was extraordinarily eloquent with that, yes.
So another technology that is related and is really changing the art world is blockchain technology, which affects, of course, NFTs. But I would like you to briefly talk about questions of how blockchain technology is actually improving questions of establishing trust establishing transparency, establishing, protecting artist rights, authentication. Pablo, why don't you start first?
Yeah, again, I think you
Pablo,
said
we're
it.
going to talk about crypto, right?
No, we're
No.
not going to talk about crypto today. I actually believe that even though digital art and AI creation should all be, let's say, authenticated through the use of blockchain, I would actually like to see a more separation between the crypto world and the digital art world. I think they have less in common than what might be apparent at the moment. But I think that you said it even in your question. I think it is very obvious now for anybody that really understands the technology that this is simply the best way, not only in the digital, but across the board to actually have better provenance, a little bit more transparency. And again, we're still working as to how to properly involve royalties in a way that I think are, let's say, are sustainable and make sense over the long term. Still, we're doing some early experimentations, but it will allow for a more transparent and open and direct tracking of everything around. Again, the trust. When you really know that there's an immutable ledger that can really make sure that an artist was created, an art piece was indeed created by a certain artist, I think that when you understand that technology and that it is really true, it can really add that layer of trust. And then I think that we're also going to experiment with different forms of collecting and loyalty over the long term. So for example, if you're creating and you're authenticating through the blockchain, you can create your community. You can actually follow the wallets that are holding these works, and perhaps you have a new collection. Perhaps you want to reward some of the people that have been supporting your journey for a long time, and you can actually interact with those wallets in a decentralized way without the need, to find their home address or to reach out directly. You can actually sometimes even an artist could either gift a work or could invite them to some sort of event, or could give them, again, use the technology, use the decentralized network to actually have a more loyal community and dynamic community over time.
Yeah, that's certainly a challenge that people consider the online or the digital context of things actually removing a certain kind of intimacy that can emerge between an artist and collector, but it's still very much possible.
Yes, and again, everything is a little bit dynamic in that way, where on the one hand, the social media allows for that direct connection with the artist, and then this also allows for a more, disconnection in a way, but engagement from artists to collectors and vice versa. Yeah.
Steve, how about you? How do you see blockchain technology playing a role here?
It's very selfishly, actually. So I'm going to do another quick survey. How many people have an Excel spreadsheet or something like that on their computer that is their art inventory, where they keep a list of the things they bought and where they bought it from and the price? Because that's what I have, a very poorly managed Excel spreadsheet on my computer. And wouldn't it be nice if somebody else just managed that whole thing? And that's what this technology promises, this shared immutable ledger that's, managed globally. And the reason, there are a couple of reasons selfishly that I really would like that is, one, I don't want to manage this spreadsheet on my machine because I live in fear of it, disappearing or, not just, disappearing. So that's one piece. And then at some point in the future, hopefully the distant future, I will, leave this planet and my kids will probably inherit the art I've got. And it's not like a massively expensive collection of art, but it's a bunch of art that they probably don't know a great deal about. And so being able to have this system that they can go to say, oh, mum and dad bought this piece 20 years ago, and here's where it came from and the history of it, and what where it was bought and what it was worth and what it's worth now. So I think that's fascinating. And then the final piece, I think, the reason I really started to look into blockchain was around the provenance, but also for the artists themselves. The first time I bought a piece of art, and it had this thing called artist resale rights, this thing called ARR, and I looked at it and I was like, ARR? Why am I paying more money? And then I realized what it was, and I really started to understand that this is an important thing. If we're going to support art, the art community, the artists, then artist resale rights is a thing that we should frankly celebrate. But if you've had a piece of art for 20 or 30 years, like, how do you manage artist resale rights? So I just think it's, the potential of it is huge for individuals, for artists, for future collectors, for current collectors. So I'm really, really excited about it. And also, frankly, I have a bunch of art that I'm busy trying to get the provenance of it, and it just becomes a very stressful activity to track down the certificates of authenticity and what's the provenance and how can I be sure that this isn't, a copied piece of work. All of that, like removing that stress from the system would be phenomenal.
I would like to further add, and he was again incredibly eloquent in saying that, but I think that all of this technology is a great addition but not a replacement to a lot of the systems that work now. I actually encourage a lot of the artists that I support to actually work also with galleries, to work with different groups and institutions that can really help them expand and utilize the innovation that we're seeing in the blockchain to further support their practice. And again, we will see the inclusion of royalties that I think are very, very important as a concept. We just need to get them right. But it's not a replacement of everything that is happening here. It's just a wonderful, wonderful addition that will increase again transparency, provenance, and hopefully royalties in the future. Yeah.
Wonderful. We very actively decided not to talk about crypto, just in case anyone was wondering about that. That's a whole other conversation, and we decided not to intentionally at this particular time. So we've covered trust and transparency and authentication. What then do we see this technology moving towards? How do we see this technology changing and transforming, collecting in the future, beginning with near future and then potentially long term as well?
I think, a little as I said earlier, I think it changes collecting by inviting more people into a space that can be both intimidating and overwhelming, as I said earlier on. And so the ability for, I'm an emerging and novice collector, but I walk onto the show floor here and think, where do I start? So changing the collecting is allowing me, if I come back to the app, we started with the app. The app invites you, when you first open it, to say, what things are you interested in? What types of art? What generations of art? What formats of art? And then, invite you to say, would you like me to build an agenda, a schedule of how do you find your way around the floor? Would you like me to introduce you to certain new artists or older? So just all of that sort of creating this very welcoming door, I think, for collectors of all types. But in particular, I think for new collectors is that's I think the most exciting thing about this journey that we're on and why we've built this app.
So I agree with what she says, but I would like to add something else as well that I think it's gonna AI and the creations through AI as well on the other side are gonna bring forward some experiments that I find very engaging. So a lot of the AI works to be dynamic, to change over time, in some cases to be even a little bit immersive, and to change a little bit of the concept of that single static object that is sometimes associated with more analog and traditional art. That again, I find that we're going to be moving more and more into that direction. And then I want to highlight one of the works that's actually being shown over here. It's a big experiment that I'm a big fan of. But there's this project that is called Boto. That it's I think that you might have seen in the collection visit the other day in our home. But this project is fantastic. It's in itself an artist that is an AI, and it has in itself it decides what it creates, how it creates it, what it curates, where does it sell, how much, how does it sell, and it makes all of these decisions by itself. It actually hired a team of people that are working for this AI to create. And again, it's an experiment that poses so many questions. Is this really an artist? Is this really art that is important? Is this an evolution of where we're going? And I find again that we cannot predict the experiments that we're going to see through this domain. It's just a very exciting, novel time, I think, for the space. It's coming up now in the screen, but it's a very exciting time that I think is going to engage people with multiple interests over time. Yeah.
Yeah. Steve, your collection is not focused on digital art at all, or the art that you've started buying, but you have a particular relationship to this technology. Do you think now in experimenting with the technology, playing with the app as you walk, will it, or has it already opened up artists that perhaps in the past you haven't thought about or considered interesting?
I would say the app and this discovery has definitely opened my eyes to artists I hadn't considered and genres I hadn't considered. But there's a couple of other things I wanted to add. Is what we never want to move away from, I certainly don't, is the ability to come to a physical space and to see the art in a place like this and to be able to interact with it and to learn about it. So digital technology is great. Like I've been involved in it for 25 years of my life, but there's a reason that we still like to come together into these spaces because of the physical nature of it, but also, the gathering of the people and the conversations that you have like this one. So let's sort of cherish that and sort of celebrate the fact that we're here and we're doing that, and technology is an assistant to it and not trying to replace that thing. The other thing I would add is, again, not to make it all about the app, but one of the things I'm excited about for the app is also for the galleries. As they sort of start to adopt and hopefully do and invest time in this. And that can be intimidating as well from the gallery side of like, well, wait a second, is technology trying to replace me here? And I really don't think it is. Over time, what we will see is galleries be able to say, well, how many people visited the booth? What did they look at? What was the most photographed image in the show? How many people looked it up? What was the demographics of the people who looked up that piece of art? Was it a younger generation, an older generation? So all of, sort of the digital construct that we're putting around art, I think is beneficial from both the collection side, but also from, the production side as well, but also the gallery side. If everybody has something to gain here, and it can be just AI, the broader topic right now, is a somewhat divisive topic. Some people are like, I don't want anything to do with AI. And that's perfectly fine. But I think over time, what we will see is it has so much potential to benefit us on whichever aspect we're coming from in this business of art.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we spoke about, I particularly have enjoyed exploring and asking questions and prompting ChatGPT about questions of art history and how to think about art. And of course, you also had been using it in terms of how to learn more deeply and profoundly. Could you speak a little bit more to that potential there?
I think the way I use it the most is with my kids. And I'll give you an example outside of art, and then I'll bring it back to art. So actually, this is sort of the outside example that's related to art. So my 15-year-old daughter came home from school 2 weeks ago, and she said to me, Dad, can you explain to me what a GPU is, a graphical processing unit? And I thought, this is it. This is my opportunity to unload 25 years of technical expertise onto my 15-year-old and just wow her. And you could see the fear in her face, and she's like, what the hell is he going to say? And I realized that I was not going to explain this very well for a 15-year-old, so I pulled out my phone and I picked up Copilot, which is the sort of generic Microsoft app on the phone. Picked up Copilot and I said, hey, Copilot, can you explain what a GPU is in language that a 15-year-old would understand? And it said, sure, no problem. And it said, think about a GPU as being a bit like having 1,000 artists inside of your computer, all of them with different oils and inks and pens and colors. And they're all simultaneously painting on the screen at the same time very quickly to create these beautiful images. And so it was kind of a fun answer, but actually it sort of gave her a good way to understand a GPU. I would have talked all about, silicon and wafers and stuff that she wasn't interested in. But that sort of taught me that I can start to use this technology to teach myself, to help my kids. And one of the things I now do with the technology is I ask it to teach me things. So a couple of weeks ago, I thought I probably should understand in more detail what these large language models are. So I said, hey, Copilot, help me understand, give me a short course in what is a large language model. And then when you finish that, create a multi-part, five-question multi-choice questionnaire to test my knowledge of it. And it did it. So it gave me a whole 3 or 4 minute dialogue about here's what large language models are. And then it asked me 5 individual questions with multiple choice answers to test my knowledge. And so I've started using that with my kids. They come home from school and they're like, Dad, can you teach me about, American art history? Can you teach me about, the Civil War? And I use the technology to help. And you might sort of say, well, aren't you sort of replacing your own pedagogy with your own kids? And it's like, well, I don't know some of these things myself. And so if I sort of bring that all the way back to art, I start to ask questions now like, help me understand the history of this artist, help me understand, who were their influences, and then test me on it. So I use it as an educational tool to teach myself about art and about art history and about the artists that I'm interested in. That was a very long answer.
No, that was excellent, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have concrete examples of how it can be used in different ways. What about you, Pablo? How have you used any of these technologies to research and discover new artists or get to learn or think more deeply about them in relation to art history?
Yeah, so again, these tools, AI in particular, is a much more effective way, as he was acknowledging, to doing research. We used to go into Google or go into a library back in the day and do our research. And this, I feel like, gathers all of the information that's available around and presents to you in a very simple to understand manner. So I actually use it, all the time to further engage and to further research into the artist in a way that is very similar to how he described. Again, it's been like we're still at the very early stages, but it feels like this is really an infinite information tool, and it's very powerful to further engage and go down the rabbit hole into any topic that you wish to do. It's actually impressive how it's actually now also gathering almost real-time information and can really get to the depths of even the newest things that are coming out in a way that I find incredibly compelling. I use it all the time. I use AI as well to help me further develop and structure my thoughts of the things that I want to put out, either in a writing, in an article, in an interview, or in a post in Twitter, Instagram, or anything where I might be at, and I find it extraordinarily useful for that research and structuring of the information around it.
Yeah, I'm wondering to the degree that how we talk about this technology and how we use it can still remain quite mystifying. And the question that emerges today is not like just the Google search that you do, but different ways of prompting it. Could you both, Steve starting first, sort of like those who have not extensive experience or would want to think more about different ways to prompt it and to engage it as a learning tool?
Yeah, I mean, I could sit and talk about prompting for a very long time. I've spent the last month with my team thinking about how do we get all of the people I work with much better at prompting. And there is this sort of loosely held view at the moment that prompt engineer is going to be the new job of the future, which I don't subscribe to. I think everybody who has a job will benefit from being very good at prompting. And so the advice I would give people around prompting is really to start with this idea that, and again, I go back to early, and you both talked about using, Google. Microsoft has a search engine as well, by the way, but I get that you use Google. But we have this very transactional relationship with search engines that you put something in and you get something out. And this technology is just incredibly different. And so the best advice I can give is you have to approach it as a conversation. And the more, not sophisticated, the more information you put into the request, the better answers that you're going to get back. And that might sound incredibly obvious, but with search engines, we might say, I'll take it outside of art for a second. If you're looking for a restaurant here this evening in Miami, you might say restaurants in Miami that are, open until 11 p.m. Whereas if you go into, and you do that same search now in Copilot or in ChatGPT, you can be much more specific and get much more specific answers back. You can say restaurants in Miami that have been open for the last 5 years, that serve this type of cuisine, that are open during these hours, that are within a 7-minute walking distance of my current location. And it will give you this technology will give you a brilliant answer to that type of stuff. And so the art of prompting really is twofold or threefold. One is entering it as a conversation and saying, I'm going to have a back and forth here, and I'm going to continue to refine. If I don't quite get what I want, I could say, well, actually, that wasn't quite what I was looking for. Can you tell me different types of cuisines or a different style of art? So that's sort of part one. Entering it as a conversation, being more sort of long-winded or exhaustive in the question that you ask is the second part. And then, I guess I'm going to repeat myself on the first one, is just thinking about it as being very, very iterative. And it's, once you really start to get your head around prompting, it's magical stuff. I'll bore you with a prompt that I sent last week to my team. I basically said, no, I'm not going to bore you with it.
Oh, now you left us on the hook. How about you, Pablo?
Well, he's obviously a lot more knowledgeable about this topic than I could ever be about how to use it. But as he said, I very much find a major difference when I constantly educate the AI on my preferences and the way that on the things that I like. So I go before asking any question or going into any topic in depth. I make sure that I give the right background for that topic, the knowledge that I currently have, the thoughts that I am thinking about, so that it caters to that. I also spend a lot of time setting up the settings, in particular in ChatGPT, of some of the preferences and how I want some of the outputs, and again, that training that goes associated. And I make sure that whenever I start a new topic, that it researches some of the information or the conversations that we've already had in between. So I often feed previous conversations that I've had with ChatGPT into the new conversation so that it shapes a little bit of where it's going. And again, I am not an expert, particular expert in this field, but I do use it, all the time. And I have seen how doing this really helps you in the outputs that you have. And I'd say, again, we're still in the early innings of this technology, and I can't begin to even imagine once you're really able to, the AI is really able to educate itself on your world, how it's going to be able to cater exactly to your needs, the answers that it gives you.
Yeah.
I'll just give you two other very practical examples, Laurie. One is, and outside of the art world again. But the first is, I was in New York a few weeks ago, and often if I'm in New York and I've got 2 or 3 days, I'll try and go and see some music, a concert while I'm there. And so I'm sat in the cab on the way from JFK into the city, and I thought, now I'm going to have to go to war with Ticketmaster. We've all done this. You go to Ticketmaster, and you put the dates in that you want, and then you put the locations, and then you put the genre of music, and ultimately you end up with this list of 55 different concerts that come back. And so in this case, I just said to Copilot, using my voice, what gigs are on in Manhattan in the next 48 hours that are in the rock and pop genre? And it came back with a list of 10 concerts, and that was it. So that was just a very accessible way to get access to something that is normally quite complicated and quite frustrating. And then I keep telling stories about my kids. My other story, and this is to sort of point out one of the advances we're really going to see a lot more of with AI over the next few years is this notion of multimodality. And what I mean by that is you can input with voice and get output with images, or you can input with text and get output with voice. And so the other example I have with my younger daughter, who's 12 years old, a few days ago she said to me, "Dad, what are we going to have for dinner tonight?" And I said, "I have no idea." And so I opened the refrigerator and I took a photograph of the contents of the fridge, and I said, "Hey, Copilot, what can I make based on the contents of the fridge?" And it said, "Oh, you have a squash here, and you have some milk, and you have some eggs. You can make a really good butternut squash soup, and here's the recipe for a butternut squash soup." And spoiler alert, I didn't make the soup. But that notion of just being able to use images or text or voice as an input and get a different output, we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think that has a huge benefit in the world of art for sure.
That makes me think a little bit about the technology around the image.
It makes me hungry.
Yeah.
Do go on.
I was hungry thinking about how it affects art. Let's say with image recognition, that you can take a photo in the app and it gives you a prompt that tells you information. So do you also foresee, say, if I like this particular style that I saw and I didn't even get the name of the artist, but I want to find and learn more about art that looks like this, for example, is that a way that the image...
Yeah, for sure. Like the ability to, and the app doesn't do that right now, but that capability is there easily to say, I went to the art fair and I took 75 images, and they were all different things. And I'll be able to say, not right now, but very quickly, you could say, categorize those images for me. What was the date ranges of the images of the art that I took images of? Where were they from? What were the different regions? And so because of sort of the inherent nature of AI to be able to understand what it's seeing, it can do all of that for you. But imagine doing that yourself. You come to a fair and you take 75 photographs, and then you go home and you look at them and you say, well, the only way I can sort them, frankly, on my phone is just in the order that they were taken. You've been able to slice and dice and mix and move them in all these different ways just because of the sort of the inherent metadata that's involved in an image is incredibly powerful.
Should collectors or aspiring collectors be concerned about accuracy in terms of the results that are coming back? For example, a date might be wrong or off by a year or two. How can they be more aware using the technology as it gets more refined?
I think in not just collectors, but AI, this AI technology, it's not infallible. 2 years ago when ChatGPT first came out, there was a whole set of examples of so-called hallucinations. So this technology is very clever, but it's also very clever when it's not very clever. And when it doesn't know the answer, it acts a little bit like a 5-year-old as it comes up with a very plausible sounding great answer. And so the technology is getting much, much better at that. But if I think about the work that we do at Microsoft, the work that my team does, we always have this notion of, you always want a human in the loop. You always want like an expert. So I wouldn't rely on it completely for 100% accuracy of information in the same way I wouldn't necessarily in the art world. So if I'm going to go and spend a lot of money on a piece of art, I would want to say, well, yeah, this will get me most of the way there maybe, but then I'm going to go and talk to Pablo or come and talk to you, Laurie, and say, well, what do you think? Is this sort of the right price? Is this the right date on the thing? And so, the accuracy it's good, but it's not perfect.
Right. Steve, do you have any thoughts on this? Sorry, Pablo.
No, again, I think he's more knowledgeable to that. I use AI in a slightly different way as a collector, and what interests me, and again, the good thing is I think it has so many uses. But what interests me in particular with AI that's happening now is actually how artists are using it as a tool as well for expressing their thoughts in a way that just before wasn't possible. For me, it's less interesting what can come out as a prompt in the creative process, and more how these artists are utilizing some, this new tooling in order to view life and nature in a way that was just impossible before. And yeah, I think that this is very engaging. I think that there's a new generation of people that are finding this very, very engaging, and I understand a little bit less about the technological aspects of the prompting and the outputs. And for me, I allow the professional artist in order to really create something that I think is meaningful through the use of the tools. I think we're going to see obviously a major expansion of artists utilizing AI, and there's going to be a major difference between the utilize AI as a finality and AI as a tool to create something. And I particularly find exciting the latter, where it is something that it's in the same way that you could have a paintbrush before. I think that right now you can use this tooling to actually express an idea that is very, very compelling.
You've already given us one example of an artwork and a whole experience that one can have. Can you talk a little bit more of other directions where artists might be using the technology and pushing boundaries?
Yeah, again, it's going to be impossible. It's really impossible to foresee what, with a fast-paced road that this is taking, to see where it's really taking us. But I really believe that this is going to completely open the gates to a much more dynamic and immersive experiences. And like he was saying before, there's nothing at the end. I like it when it's then brought back to a physical manifestation of some kind, to a shared I often say lately that there's nothing more powerful than shared human experience. We need to be able to withdraw these creations that are coming from this tooling into a physical manifestation of these things in order to really, really embed ourselves in that creative process. I think is very, very important. And I expect highly dynamic change, works that change over time, works that are a lot more immersive and at scale, works that that can view and analyze complex concepts in a way that was just not available before, and systems that create other systems from those creations. That's something that I think PAC does particularly well. I think it's very difficult to see exactly where this is going, but to a much more dynamic outputs of creation.
Wonderful. Before we close, I would like both of you to have a moment and sort of give some practical advice to aspiring collectors or very early novice collectors, and maybe even some collectors that have been collecting for a while but want to take it in new directions. Any practical advice to approaching these tools?
Yeah, I think the most practical advice is don't be intimidated by it. And I understand why people can be and why people are resistant, some of the popular media around AI in particular. But the only way to really figure out if it's beneficial and useful is to use it. And if it's not, in the case of this app, to give feedback through the app and say that wasn't quite what I wanted, or can I do this? But it's in the same way that art can be intimidating for somebody like me, technology can be intimidating for other people. But the best way to get over that is to engage with it and to use it. And I think this particular wave of technology, of generative AI, is probably the one of, the last piece of technology wave that I saw was as important as this, that I think will have such a profound impact, was the arrival of the internet, frankly. And we see how much that's, changed the world and changed commerce and changed art and all of these things. So my very simple advice is just, try the technology out and use it, whether it's this app or whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's Copilot. But this wave of generative AI, it really does, its ability to sort of break down barriers is really quite impressive.
Wonderful. Well, how about you, Pablo?
Just have curiosity and participate. I think that this general new movement that we're seeing through the rise of the digital, through AI in this world, is an extraordinarily inviting community. And again, it might, as you were saying, it might seem like there's a technology barrier, but it's really not. And once you get inside of it and you participate, you're gonna see how it's extraordinarily welcoming. Just participate, come inside, try things out, and use the tools not only for discovery, but to actually get embedded into this ecosystem in a way that is very easy. You're going to find, again, a community that is very welcoming, wide open arms, and you're going to find some concepts and ways to engage where you don't have to be necessarily a major art connoisseur to participate in this digital renaissance that we're seeing. You can be from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, from all ages, and you're going to find, I'm sure, very compelling, dynamic, creations that speak to people from all domains. So participate. Come join us, and you'll see how we'll welcome you with open arms.
Being proactive in both cases, not be intimidated, and pursue your curiosity.
Yes.
I think it's a great note to end with.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, everybody. A round of applause for our panelists.